Hi, I'm Bri Allison with Power of the Patient Project, and welcome to our new segment, Tell Us Your Story. Today we are joined by Diane Pinder, a registered nurse. Diane has been a nurse researcher in oncology at Duke University for the last 6 years. She is also the wife of Robert Koshinskie, one of our earlier guests. Bob is currently battling pancreatic cancer. So welcome, Diane, and thank you for joining us today. So to start off, can you first explain the area of nursing that you work in?
Currently, I work in oncology research, and the patients that I work with have a genitourinary cancer. So most of the patients that I have are either patients with prostate cancer or have bladder cancer. And some patients are early stage into their diagnosis, whereas the bladder cancers are stage 4, which, it's been metastasized to other sites. So originally, I'm actually in my 49th year of nursing. I graduated in nursing school in 1973, and I've had this journey through doing some amazing things. I started out working at a local hospital. I worked mostly in cardiology as a manager. So I managed an ICU, CCU. I managed a cardiology department. I went into commercial settings, and that's where I met Bob originally in a patient care monitoring device. And then just sort of went along my way doing different things in nursing. And then we made the decision to move to North Carolina. And I just set my sights on Duke. I really, really wanted to work there. And I really wanted to go into clinical research. So that's primarily what I do. So it's not specifically bedside care, but I am a strong advocate for patients who are on clinical trials, and I help them navigate through that process.
Wow, you've definitely been through a lot of different nursing areas.
I snuck in about 10 years of being a master chocolatier when I was up in New Jersey. So that was sort of my break from nursing for a little bit, but it doesn't pay a lot of money. So we went back into nursing again.
And how did you get into nursing in the first, what made you get into the field?
I decided when I was in 3rd grade that I was going to be a nurse.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's so long ago, I don't exactly remember what made me think that, but it was what I set my sights on and just have been doing it ever since then. I remember, and it's interesting because I saw for a while a lot of people where nursing was their secondary career, where nursing has always been my primary career, and then I've done other stuff. So yeah, it's like 49 years worth of nursing that's in me, and more because I decided, in 3rd grade, that was what I was going to be.
Wow. Well, that's great that you got to live out your childhood dream and become a nurse.
I wasn't a big hit with my grandmother. I remember she was an immigrant from Poland. And when I announced that I was going to be a nurse, she was mortified because she saw nurses as prostitutes. And it was like, I didn't even know what a prostitute was when I was in 3rd grade. She wanted me to be a teacher. But I think nursing, I encourage anybody who thinks about it to go into it because it just is an amazing field, and it offers so many different opportunities to actually even interact with some really amazing people as well.
Oh, definitely. And what keeps you positive while working on the oncology unit? Because I'm sure that that is a struggle.
Yeah, you hit that. First of all, Duke it's been recognized as one of the top employers in the US, but besides that, I can't begin to tell you how supportive Duke is in terms of giving me opportunities before Bob's diagnosis, being supportive all along the journey that I've had opportunities to achieve different goals. I was able to achieve another goal that I had in life. I always wanted to publish, and at Duke, I was able to publish a paper in collaboration with some of my coworkers, in addition to publishing a poster along with principal investigators of prostate cancer studies for a leading drug that's prescribed to prostate cancer patients. So I was able to be the main author on that with all the other doctors behind me. So that was kind of sweet. So there's a lot of different things that I've been able to do there, but with this happening with Bob, they've just wrapped my arms around the both of us and have helped us so much along the way. But I also really enjoy the interaction with my patients and their families. I don't get overloaded with 20, 30 patients at a time because the studies are so complicated. It's sort of one by one by one. And because I navigate and I advocate for them, a lot of the patients become reliant on me actually being able to get to the doctor quicker for them or giving them the type of advice. And I really try to be very transparent with them and help to educate them about their disease. So I have found that really, really rewarding. And it prepared me, for the journey that I have now as well.
Yes, and that kind of leads into my next question. Can you tell us about what you went through after hearing about Bob's diagnosis of pancreatic cancer?
I have to start out saying that January started out weird for me. I don't think Bob brought it up in his conversation, but I had this time last year and until January had been caring for my elderly parents. Both of them were in their 90s, and they came to the time where they were very, very ill. They were in and out of the hospital. They needed a lot of care. I needed to actually leave my job at Duke and go down to Florida to care for them and start the process to try to get them on Medicaid because they didn't have a lot of money and they needed to go into nursing home care. So it was kind of traumatic because on one hand, here I knew they were dying, both of them. And then on the other hand, there were a lot of transactional things that I needed to do. And so January started out, my dad died on January 1st and my mother died on January 9th. So within days of each other. So I was sort of going through that grieving process with them, after losing them. And then Bob started to not feel well, and he'd always been healthy. There's just he had some back issues, but he just started complaining of a lot of abdominal pain and radiating to his back. And as a nurse, it was driving me crazy because I think the women in the audience will appreciate how men sort of are dismissive about what's going on with them. Oh, it's this, oh, it's that. And he did ask his doctor, and his doctor sort of saw it more as an irritable bowel syndrome type of thing. Mm-hmm. And as a nurse, I was concerned about more, but I wasn't sure what it was. And there was nothing diagnostic for me to look at because that's always what I had to because of the nature of what I do. Mm-hmm. So I did badger him for a while. He did go back. I think it was when he had his weight loss of about 15, 20 pounds, and he wasn't trying to lose weight. That really set the alarms going. And then when he had his CAT scan and the doctor called and said he had a tumor on his pancreas, it just floored me. I just never in a million years imagined, pancreatic cancer for him. And everybody's first response to pancreatic cancer is like, oh my God, because it's a beast. It's unpredictable. And it was just really, really scary. So I had just been finishing grief counseling. And then I found myself, the first thing I did is I got him to Duke rather than the regional center that he was going to. The doctor was going to order some consultations with people locally, and it was like, he's going to Duke. So I told him who to send the consults to. And what to ask for. And then as soon as I got off the phone with the doctor, I called up the people that he was sending the consults into to tell them, here's my story, and I need you to do this fast. And that's where Duke came in. They were just amazing because within days, and there's a lot of people who go through a long period of time to get to diagnosis to treatment. And it was quickly, it was in a week for Bob, that he had that. So then it became, I'm the clinician and I'm the caregiver. And it's really hard. At first, it was very hard for me to kind of separate one from the other. I didn't know where I stopped and started. I would look at everything in terms of symptoms, and I don't know if I was overthinking them, but I was very vigilant with him, and he had a rough start. And the thing I started to is something that people might recognize, the people that listen to this, is here with my parents, I went through grief of losing them. And now I started something like anticipatory grief. Because here was this man who I had spent years with, and we were just planning things together. And then suddenly I recognized that I was going to be a widow in a shorter period of time than I had originally anticipated. And it's like, what do you do with that? I couldn't control it. There was only so much I could do for him other than to obsess over his care. And Bob, as you may have noticed when you spoke with him, he's very pragmatic. He looks at things in a very systematic way.
Yeah.
And I'm the emotional nutcase on the other side of it. So here I am. I didn't know what was going through his head. Like, I'm watching him and I'm looking at signs and symptoms and who should I call and what should I do and how do I manage this stuff? And he's just going through things very pragmatically. And it wasn't until he wrote up the plan. And I think right away he recognized that, his time was going to be short-lived. And there were things that needed to get done to make sure, should I survive him, that they had to be taken care of. So he created a plan for me so that I understood, where do I find things, which was important. I didn't know what his passwords were. How do I manage investments? He made sure everything was turned into me as a beneficiary, so that, because there was a lot of struggle with that with my parents. I learned a lot of lessons from that. And those lessons I learned from that, I communicated to Bob, and we were able to put all that stuff in place. So now I've kind of come to terms with that. I'm scared because as a nurse, I know what death looks like. And I know what approaching death looks like, where, someone's incontinent, someone's having a lot of pain. There's wound things that you have to think of, because I've been there. And I think about that Bob, and here this independent person is going to face this. And my heart aches for the fact that he's going to be facing something like that. So, it's like counseling, different things, that you can do, but it does kind of smack you up the side of the head, and start to look at your own mortality as well. So yeah, it was tough. It was really tough.
No doubt. I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your parents. But luckily Duke was there for you guys through this whole process.
Oh yeah.
And Bob's so lucky to have you and kind of have the nurse side, but also the wife. So he got 2 for 1. But which you kind of touched on this a little bit, how has being a caretaker for Bob kind of differ from working in the hospital setting for you?
It was a big deal, because as a research coordinator for the clinical research studies, I constantly have to look into the future. So if I have a protocol that I'm going to have a patient go on, there's timelines that you have to work with, and you have to get certain things within what they call windows. So there's labs and activities that you're always looking out and planning for in the future to try and take care of. And the other thing is that anything that a patient experiences, you have to document that as an adverse event, and you have to grade it. And then there's certainly, in the stuff that I do, with the GU research, if someone has a scan, you're always looking at, well, what do you see on the scan? And how do you measure that? And does it show progression? So that kind of stuff really contaminated my head in terms of taking care of Bob, because knowing that, or recognizing that his time is short now, I needed to take it day by day. And I have never in my life understood what it was to live moment to moment rather than out to the future. So I'm trying to get my arms around that. I still, and I have to switch on and off because I'm still working full time. So, during the day, I'm trying to look out into the future for my cancer patients. And a lot of times I'll work from home. I go over to the hospital when I'm actually seeing somebody, but there's a lot of work that I can do from home. And then I have to switch my mindset to think of, like, appreciate what's happening in the moment. And I'm sure I drive his doctors crazy because going to the adverse events, I'm looking at everything with a fine-tooth comb. I'm picking up on everything. Every single result that he gets from a blood test or a scan, I literally do a research, a literal literature search on everything to, like, look up, well, what does that mean and how's it compared to that? And that's, like, just the nature of me. So I'm sort of my own worst enemy, but it's this whole thing of trying to switch from, being one person to switch to the other person. And the other thing, that I had to kind of get my arms around was that sometimes what the doctors tell you as a caregiver and as to the patient can be very different than what they're saying when they go back into the workroom and they're looking at stuff. Not a real lot, but they soften it. And to me, I needed the hard truth, and I had a really hard time finding the hard truth from people. I had to sort of demand it because that's what I needed, because that was what I could wrap my arms around and make sense of.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very hard to turn the nurse off in you and just try and be at home and be the wife.
I actually, the cancer centers, and this is true for all of them, and it was sort of a point I was going to make up to you or make to you later, was that they all have a ton of resources for cancer patients. They have a lot of resources for breast cancer. They have a lot of resources at Duke for brain cancer, lung cancer. And they do have resources for pancreatic cancer. So I needed to go into, I tried one-on-one counseling, but it was just taking up too much time. So then I joined a forum, and I found myself, as patients were describing stuff, I couldn't keep myself in a colleague kind of thing. I kept wanting to advise them. I'm like, oh, here's what you do. Here's what you do. And it wasn't working for me. On one hand, I was trying to help them, but it wasn't helping me. So I think what I needed to do was find someone who would have the same histrionics as me, that if I was moaning and groaning about something, they would get it and they'd moan and groan back to me, but they would sort of keep the attention on me, because that's what I needed, was someone to keep the attention on me and me not having to caregive to other people. So that's been a challenge. I've tried out a lot of different forums. So I haven't exactly found that yet, but yeah, it is hard.
Hopefully you'll find something that works for you best in the future.
Yeah.
And so how do you feel that Bob's diagnosis has affected your work and the way that you communicate with your patients?
Sort of the obvious thing, I guess, is like I was always great with my patients. I believe that I've always advocated for them. I've always tried to educate for them. I always tried to take really good care of them. And now here I am, I'm them. I'm looking at all this from their point of view as opposed to my point of view. And I think that I try to be as honest as I can, particularly in research, because research is hard for patients to go through. It's a really hard thing to do. And the best thing I feel like I need to do is be honest with them, because that's what I look for. So I don't think anymore that I want to get as close to the patients as I did before. And the only reason for that is because my time is sapped. Like, I need to still have the energy for Bob, and I need to make sure my patients are safe and I do my job right, but I need to pull away a little bit and focus all that energy on him, because that's what he needs right now. So, yeah.
Definitely. It brings in a whole new perspective for you, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. And when you see in the cancer center, you look at the other people that are sitting in the waiting room with you, and he has a unique advantage over other people, because I can swipe my badge and get him into something sooner. I can look at my chart, which is the patient side of the electronic medical record, and I can interpret all this stuff for him. And I look at all these other people, and they might be sitting there by themselves, and you feel so bad because you need someone with you. And I think a lot of the hospitals, what they need to do is have the nurse navigators to really focus in on those patients that really need to have their hand held. And I think that's primarily what I was doing a lot before with my patients on the studies, is, holding their hand and taking them through the process. And I don't think I can do that as much anymore. It might be different later on, when things change for Bob, but not right now. Yeah.
Understandably so. And lastly, what's something that you wish everyone would know about the cancer journey, and what advice do you have for someone whose family member has been diagnosed with cancer?
I think the first thing that, I saw this question and what came to mind is that when someone receives that diagnosis, there's two people that need to be taken care of. First and foremost, it's the patient, but also the caregiver, because the caregiver really needs a phenomenal amount of support because of what they witness and have to go through day by day with the cancer patient. And it's a struggle, to kind of maintain your composure, to find someone, that'll help you. And you struggle with, you don't want to be selfish because you're not going through what that patient is going through, but you're still a human being and you still have your feelings, good feelings, stupid feelings. You just have those feelings, and you need to be allowed to have those and not be judged by them, but be held up by other people. So, I think patients, number one, when they get that cancer diagnosis is, recognizing those two parts. And I'm telling the caregivers, find something that keeps you whole. For me, I am lucky that both my adult children are here in North Carolina with us. Like our son moved from California, moved in with us. And it's just, there's days when Bob is just sort of like, he's in himself, he's experiencing his pain and stuff. And to have my son there and be able to talk to him is life-saving to me. So, get those people around you that you can talk to. Same with my daughter, like she's a rock. And then my sister, who went through the whole thing with my parents with me, has just been really solid for me. And I'm so grateful that she's around. But you get a cancer diagnosis, get to a center of excellence, an NIH center of excellence, because you have to go through the standard of care therapy, because that's what's proven to help the cancer. But it can progress. It can turn into something else. And clinical research offers those opportunities of not only something else to help care, give treatment to the patient, but also it's helping people in the future. And, right now I'm like really zeroed in on pancreatic cancer because it's kind of an unknown, it's a rare cancer. So there hasn't been a lot of energy, and there's not a lot of stuff out there. And, with that, get genetic testing, because precision medicine is becoming really, really important. And instead of pumping these chemicals into your body, that's like killing everything, your hair, your nerves in your fingers and all that. Precision medicine is finding those treatments that are just going to target those abnormal cells. So that's really important for, if you have a mutation, find it out right away, so that when the time comes for you to be treated, that you have the treatment that's there for you, that you get the right thing. And I think that, finding someone to navigate and help you through that process is really, really important. Ask the hospital for it, ask your friends for it, but, definitely someone who can kind of get you through that process, because healthcare is tough. And then, clinical research, I guess what they say now is just generally almost like a standard of care for people with cancer is to be part of clinical research. And that's why it's important with the centers of excellence, because there's access. You can go to clinicaltrials.gov and you can look for cancer treatments that are ongoing and at the major centers. I look at that all the time. I know how to do it. So I was lucky. A lot of people don't realize that exists. And a lot of the foundations that help people, like for Bob, it's PanCan, but even the breast cancer or any of those other ones can help you navigate to the right research studies. And the other thing is don't do crazy stuff. Like I look at the forums and there's just people are like advising others to take unproven drugs and you don't know what the side effects are. It's really serious. Look for a clinical trial. Don't look to take crazy stuff. And most people will understand that. It's just go for the proven things or things that are under the guidance of medical professionals, so that if there's a side effect, they can help you rather than doing something on your own that may eventually make things worse. And clinical research, again, it's not easy. There's different phases at the different hospitals. Phase 1 is first in human, and there's a lot of blood tests. There's a lot of visits. Phase 3 phase 2 is sort of a little bit more like phase 1, and phase 3, it's just generally compared against standard of care. So there's opportunities like that, but it's also not free. So take a real good look at your finances to understand, what is going to be billed to your insurance and what is the study sponsor going to cover for you. Because I've seen patients who have had their life savings depleted in order to become part of a clinical study. So I guess those are the 3 things. It's like genetic testing, take care of yourself as a caregiver, and find a navigator.
Well, thank you so much for giving us both a nurse perspective and a caretaker perspective, but all great advice. So that concludes our interview for today. Again, Diane, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. We appreciate you and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And if you're interested in telling your story with us, please reach out with your name and your email address to set up an interview. Email me at powerofpatient@gmail.com. I'm Bri Allison for the Power of the Patient Project, the National Library of Patient Rights and Advocacy. Thank you for watching.